Start recording. Okay, so welcome everyone. I just want to start off by reminding everybody that the webinar will be recorded and posted later, and also to send your questions to the Q&A function throughout the presentation for afterwards. So our speakers today are Michael and Lucas from GiveDuet. I'm just going to give a really brief intro on them and then let them explain their work at GiveDuet. But I think that this presentation is really going to help us see and understand what our theme this week, the paradigm shift in action, really looks like. So Michael is the founder and CEO of GiveDuet. He graduated from USC with a degree in business and international relations. His professional experience is in startups, wealth management, and nonprofit philanthropy, and he began his work on GiveDuet throughout his last year in school. And Lucas is the CTO at GiveDuet, and he graduated as well from USC, but with a bachelor's degree in computer science and a master's degree in electrical engineering. While at USC, he founded the nation's first undergraduate student organization dedicated to using AI for social good called Case++. Lucas is interested in using technology to make the world a more equitable place. So without further ado, thank you both so much for being here and speaking for us, and welcome.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you, Shada.
Yeah, thank you, Shada, and thank you, Maddie, as well. I have to say I've absolutely adored the relationship that we've managed to create between Duet and Insight, and I can't wait to hear more and more about how well the summer has been going. I can't believe we're already on week 5 when we started talking about this sort of months ago. So it's incredibly exciting to see how much you've done with this program. Perfect. So the presentation will last sort of 15 to 20 minutes. And then I'm really excited to get into the Q&A. So I'd first like to tell you about my first moment in a refugee camp. And I'll start with all the assumptions that I had going into it. I really thought I was going to be stepping into a sort of a real hodgepodge of an environment. You know, I thought there are people from, you know, many different places, many different parts of many different countries, everyone sort of a different individual coming with their own story. And I was really expecting this sort of real eclectic, almost, you know, vibrant environment in terms of the diversity of the group. And I actually remember the first thought I had, or the real first powerful thought I had, was actually this is incredibly uniform. And uniform is actually maybe the perfect word. You know, everyone's walking around, you know, in a Messi or Ronaldo shirt that had been donated and handed out. People actually had this refugee uniform, and it was very clear that actually the individual wasn't really represented. It was a group of people that had actually become similar in this one aspect, where, you know, they were being treated as this large collective group, even though that's not what they were. And as I stood there, sort of some individuality broke through the fog, and through the camp was this man carrying a fishing rod. And it was the only thing that I could see at that moment that looked like it was actually owned by someone. You know, everything else was part of the uniform. It was things that had been donated, things that clearly weren't people's own sort of personal possessions. And yet there was this man walking through with his fishing rod. And so I went up to him and I said, you know, what is this? How did you get this? And then he started to tell me a story. He started telling me that he didn't like the food in the camps. And at this point, I'd seen some of the food distribution systems, and I was like, okay, so, you know, what's wrong with the food? Well, I don't know if it's halal or not. And I mean, that blew my mind separately. Like, you know, how can you serve ambiguously, or, you know, non-halal meals in a majority, you know, halal camp was beyond me. But he was like, yeah, you know, we can't eat the food here. And, you know, my wife's pregnant and she's not getting enough nutrition. I have some young kids. My young kid also has an allergy. So again, we can't eat a lot of the food. And I was like, okay, but, you know, how do you have this fishing rod? And he was like, well, I go into town every day around 4 o'clock, and I catch 2 fish, and I bring the fish home, and I use those I use that extra calories and extra protein to supplement the diets of my family. And I was like, that's amazing. That's absolutely wonderful. But how did you get this fishing rod? Was it donated? And he said, no, there's no NGO handing out fishing rods. And I was like, so how did you get it? How did you get the money? And he said, well, we get a stipend. And, this month I forwent food and medicine for my family, and I saved up and I bought this fishing rod. And now it's a great source of success for my family. And in that moment, I realized that there was this individual who had just been given a tiny amount of financial flexibility, and he had been able to craft his own solution to the situation that he was in. And sort of in that moment, Duet, I think, was truly founded. And I was with my co-founder at the time, and we were discussing, and we really realized that when you don't treat people as individuals with individual problems and individual solutions, you are creating a system that is inefficient, ineffective, and undignified. I would like you to all meet Farmaz. Farmaz and his family fled from Afghanistan to Lesbos in 2018, and for months lived without the support they needed to rebuild their lives. After spending months in a refugee camp in Lesbos, they were moved to an empty apartment and given a $300 monthly stipend, barely enough to make ends meet for the whole family. They were alone in a foreign country and could not justify spending money on basic items. In times of crisis, people want to help. And people want to help families such as Farmaz. But whether or not that help is actually effective is a different question entirely. In fact, studies show that 70% of aid does not make it to its intended recipient, getting lost in organizational quagmires and wasted on unnecessary items. Part of the reason for this is that the aid that has gone toward the refugee crisis has largely been built around bulk donations. The result is a 7-year-old girl being given an Adidas sweatshirt that's 5 sizes too big, or shoes that simply don't fit. And it's great that people want to help, but if that kindness is not channeled properly, these donations can often end up going to waste. Back to my first trip in a refugee camp, I saw an organization trying to hand out Lush bath bombs to people who didn't have access to warm water, let alone a bathtub, let alone the cultural, bathtubs being a culturally normal way of washing. And even though donors approach these crisis situations with the best of intentions, the current reality is that it's incredibly difficult to know if, as a donor, you've actually made a difference. To put it simply, the intended recipients of aid are not getting the items they truly need, and donors are not getting the transparency they deserve. And finally, in all of this, philanthropic systems have continued to ignore the local economies that bear a significant cost of supporting thousands of people seeking aid. Bulk in-kind donations often get shipped in from abroad, completely bypassing the local supply chains whose job it is to get goods into these communities. These bulk donations, coupled with declines in tourism, have caused more than 90% of the shops in small towns like Moria Village to close down in recent years. Local store owners are struggling, yet their struggles are too often forgotten. Causes more than purely economic. It can create feelings of us versus them between refugees and locals, making it that much more difficult for refugees to integrate into their new homes. It seems like at several steps along the way, the current philanthropic system is flawed. But it doesn't have to be that way.
So at Duet, we have created a new model of philanthropy built to solve these problems in global aid. Our concept is simple, yet radical. Refugees request the exact items they need from local stores right in their own communities, and donors pay for those items on their behalf. Duet launched in March of 2019 on the island of Lesbos, Greece, where we work with local NGOs to onboard the most vulnerable refugee families onto our platform. Here's how it works. The refugee walks into one of the stores we work with, takes a picture of the exact item that they need, and uploads the picture through our refugee app. This way, we avoid making assumptions about their needs and wants, because when organizations make these assumptions, they naturally get them wrong. On our webpage, which is live at giveduet.org, donors are able to meet our families, read their stories, and see their requested items. Selecting and donating an item takes as little as 4 clicks. And keeping our millennial donors in mind, we've even built a donation tracker so that they can follow their donation every step along the way. Now, once we've successfully received a donation, we automatically transfer the money to the local store, and we send the refugee a unique pickup code. Then, after the refugee has picked up the item, they then send us a confirmation photo, which we share with the donor to close the loop. So this new model of philanthropy is attractive to all of our stakeholders. Stores receive additional revenue, donors experience a more transparent and instantly gratifying way of giving, and refugees receive the items that they truly need in a more human and dignified way. Now at Duet, 100% of the donation goes to the refugee, but we still generate revenue in 2 ways. So first, at checkout, we give donors the option to increase their donation by 15% to cover our operational costs. This is very common among our competitors, and so far, over 98% of our donors have increased their donation. Now, second, and this is in part what separates us from our competition, we charge the stores a small 5% fee for brokering the sale. So for every $1 that gets donated, we make, on average, 20 cents. Now, as you all know, we're certainly not the only group of people attempting to help in this massive crisis. And as you all must know by now, large and small organizations alike have stepped up to help how they can, which is absolutely fantastic. But one thing we've experienced is their proposed solutions can often leave something to be desired. So for example, while big organizations like the UNHCR are able to reach large audiences and scale their solutions globally, giving to these big organizations can leave donors feeling like they're sending money into a black box. And this is especially true of donors who maybe are giving smaller amounts, like $20 at a time. Alternatively, smaller organizations are able to provide more personalized stewardship for both donors and refugees, but they lack the ability to scale. And this limits the reach that these smaller nonprofits are able to have. At Duet, what we're really excited about is the fact that our tech capabilities allow us to feel small, but think big. And we're excited to show you where that's gotten us so far. Our focus on transparency and frictionless use has helped us build a loyal and engaged donor base of over 350 donors from across the world. At our core, Duet aims to create meaningful one-to-one connections between donors and refugees so that we can make meaningful connections that cross borders and cultures. Often, refugees send us a thank you note after they successfully pick up the item. As an example, the Khan family sent this thank you note to Shoko, a donor from Japan, after she helped provide a backpack for the kids to carry school supplies. The message was reciprocated by Shoko, who wanted to share her wishes from halfway across the world. So stories like this show that through Duet, every donation has the power to make the world a smaller, friendlier place. In recent interviews with our Duet families, they expressed the transformative impact that our donors have been able to create through the hundreds of items that have been donated thus far. One grateful father simply shared that when you feel you can afford the needs of your children, it makes you feel better about yourself. The impact we've seen for our partner families is direct, simple, and transformative. To date, the Duet community has donated over $40,000 worth of goods, generating over $40,000 in direct revenue for local stores and supporting small family-owned businesses and longtime Lesbos residents. But the change we are creating on Lesbos goes much deeper than simply the dollars donated. Refugees feel safe shopping in Duet stores, and store owners have started to feel emotional connections to the Duet families. When we went to Greece earlier this year, in-person interviews have shown a shift in perceptions from a sense of otherness to one of viewing each other as neighbors and as friends. Interaction leads to empathy, empathy leads to acceptance, and acceptance leads to community. Last February, we met with Faramars again, a whole year since we first onboarded his family onto Duet. A few months ago, he requested a laptop so that he could start learning English and so that he could send his resume to job opportunities nearby. The laptop got donated through our site shortly thereafter, and after picking the laptop up from the store, Faramars immediately used it to get in touch with other volunteers and to improve his language skills online. He achieved near fluency in English in just a year, and eventually he was able to get a job as an interpreter with Doctors Without Borders. He now uses his income to support his family and other refugees in his community in an effort to give back. The day before we left Greece, he invited us to his home, where we became his guests, and where his family served us homemade tea using the same kettle that was donated through Duet almost a full year ago. Faramars and his family can now stand on their own 2 feet, an incredible testament to the impact the Duet community has had. So in Greece, we've seen Duet not only provide direct support for refugees and local economies, but also, and perhaps more importantly, integrate communities, helping people rebuild their lives and realize their potential.
But our long-term vision goes far beyond Greece. As we speak, there are economic refugees from Venezuela hoping to provide for their families, veterans returning to civilian life with PTSD, young adults who were once homeless who have now lost their jobs due to COVID-19. Duet has the potential to help each of these vulnerable populations find their footing during these difficult times. And so we're on a mission to spread this model to help vulnerable populations all over the world. As USC graduates and LA locals, we are committed to applying our new model to tackle the challenges we are facing at home in LA by serving young adults who are transitioning out of homelessness. COVID-19 has allowed us to expedite that timeline and begin providing assistance straight away. Earlier this summer, we partnered with Every Table, an LA-based restaurant to provide hot and healthy meals to young adults who are transitioning out of homelessness and who are dealing with the harsh economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. During this pivotal moment, Duet will help provide them with the assistance they need to allow them to shift their priorities from today's survival to tomorrow's goals, all the while supporting LA businesses. Thanks to our generous donors, we've already raised over $10,000 to help kickstart these efforts. If anyone is interested in contributing, they can go to giveduet.org after the event, and there's a banner at the top of the page that will link you to our COVID-19 response page. After proving our model in Greece, we're now incredibly excited to see what sort of impact we can have both in LA and on a global scale. I want to also end by mentioning that we could not have achieved any of this without the generous support of our advisors and mentors. For those of you in the audience, we would love to connect with you after this event to hear your feedback and discuss how you can get involved as well. Now more than ever, we need people to come together to help those in need, both halfway across the world and right here in our own communities. We invite you to join Duet. Together.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for a great presentation. It seems like an amazing model that really helps solve some of those inefficiencies that were existing before. So right now we're going to open up the floor for questions. You guys can either use the chat or the Q&A function. I have a couple questions that Maddie and I wrote up before in case people need some time to think. But the first question is, I guess, what any challenges that you guys faced when or have been facing during the pandemic in terms of still using GiveDuet as an effective platform, and any new challenges that have occurred right now.
Well, our first main challenge was that in March, all the shops in Greece shut. So sort of straight away, that put a huge dent in our ability to operate. We're very lucky that Greece actually has been handling the pandemic quite well, and all the stores have since reopened. We're also lucky that our model doesn't rely on volunteers and a huge number of interactions or central meeting points. So we're lucky that it's in a sense quite pandemic proof when the stores are open, simply because sort of the families can go in their own time with their own safety in mind, and they don't have to sort of congregate in big groups or in central locations. So we've been lucky on that front that the stores have reopened. But the pandemic also offered us an opportunity to really get to work on our first US LA expansion, and really sort of sparked, already created an even deeper immediate need in certain populations in the US that we were able to sort of quite rapidly adjust to, given sort of the flexible platform that, well, Lucas and the rest of the team have created.
Yeah. The question that we have, I think, from Maddie to you guys is, Lucas, could you explain a little bit how the algorithm that the website utilizes works? Because some of the people in our program are in the tech or comp sci field, and might be interested in sort of hearing that side of it.
Sure. One thing that we wanted to consider when we were initially building the site is that we don't want certain families to be getting significantly more donations than other families. That's kind of the root of the problem that we wanted to address, or that we wanted to avoid while building out this site. For example, like one option that we give our families is to use a placeholder picture if they're not comfortable having their actual family image up on the site. And in situations like that, we don't want families to get kind of unjustly penalized if they're not, if they have those sort of privacy concerns. So what we've done is, if you actually go to our site at giveduet.org, you'll see at the top right, there's a Help a Family button. And what that button does is it looks at the donation history, and it tries to find a family who has received fewer donations than other families in the past. So what we do is we look at this donation history, and there's some element of randomness to it, but on average, we will tend to select a family that has received fewer donations than other families and present that family to the donor. So you won't see the exact same family every time, but on the whole, that tends to even things out pretty nicely in the long term. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, so the algorithm kind of works to make it a more equitable space on your website, in terms of like prioritizing, and also the element of privacy that's really important, and that's sometimes lost with humanitarian aid, not by intentionally, but that does, yes, happen a lot.
Right.
Okay, so if anyone else in the audience has questions, now is the time. But I think that, yeah, from our end, I mean, you guys did an amazing job presenting, and the model, it just, again, seems incredible and super effective, and sort of works on those parts that were lacking in the humanitarian aid sector. So thank you so much for your time and for a great presentation, and we look forward to continue working with you in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, you guys. That was like really effective. Our participants are going to learn so much from that, what more of like the innovative creation side of the paradigm shift looks like. So we appreciate you guys so much.
Perfect. And absolutely, we are, Mandy and I, we've spoken about this, but we would love to hear from absolutely anyone and anyone. They can either use the hello@giveduet.org email, or they can email me directly, or Lucas directly at Michael and lucas@giveduet.org.
Yeah,
Great.
I'll throw a quick
Awesome.
plug out there actually. So we're wrapping up our summer internship program right now. On the engineering side, if there are kind of people who are on the tech side, there are certainly ways to get involved in the nonprofit space, and joining our team is one of them. So don't be afraid to reach out.
Great. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Thank you so much, you guys.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Shada. Thank you, Maddie.
Bye.
Bye.